Chapter 5. Adam. Sergeant Tremaine slowed Bathsheba to a walk. The sign, demarcating the northern outskirts of San Quentin, had a triangle of snow crusting in the lower corner. If the snow kept falling and the wind continued, the wet snow would stick, defying gravity, covering half the sign within an hour. It was still too early. Far too early to head for the barge and hunker down, awaiting dawn. Darren gnawed on his lip and considered options. The hornet's nest they'd kicked up at the Siegfried line had been unanticipated, to say the least. Since Good Friday, they had not seen more than a few dozen of the things together, and they had been careful not to engage any groups that size. That they had accidentally charged headlong into a confrontation with a brigade-sized contingent was overwhelming to consider. A group that big could separate into platoons and scour every inch of San Quentin and its surrounding woods, fields, and hamlets, turning out anyone hidden away in a cellar or hayloft. If they were methodical, they could traverse the entire city, inch by inch. He had little doubt that hiding in the hold of the lone barge in a narrow canal would be a literal dead end. The city was directly south of him. If he turned east and circled it in that direction, he would eventually hit the Somme River. He could burn time, following the river's edge back west until he reached the delta, where the San Quentin Canal joined it. From there he could take his time, tracing the canal to the barge. By then the distant dawn would be closer, and he would know for certain if he had been trailed or not. Darren Tremaine turned Bathsheba's head and spurred her off-road, heading southeast into the trees. The dim outlines of the decimated village of Vermond appeared out of the snowstorm. Francois guided Caitlin and Adolphe through a wide-open field on a straight course to the steeple and cross that poked up into the dark sky above the bell tower of Sainte Marguerite Church. When they came to the wooden fence that demarcated the property of the diocese, Francois stopped. Caitlin and Adolphe came to a halt beside him. Caitlin saw the concern in his tightening jaw muscles. As they contracted, they pushed the scars on his face into deep furrows. "What is it?" she asked. There's a body here. We must destroy it if it remains, but then we can shelter in the church tower." "Only one?" asked Caitlin. "Oui. At least there was only one this morning. I should have cut it to pieces while it lay dead, but I did not imagine I would return here." Caitlin nodded. Adolphe had no idea what had halted their forward momentum. What? What is going on?" Caitlin held a finger to her lips. She mimed a throat being slit and pointed toward the church. "Dead man. There's a dead man in the church." Adolphe hoped he misunderstood. Francois led the way, cutlass hanging naked and ready in his hand. Caitlin and Adolphe followed his steps. The inside of the church was silent. As Francois opened the doors, the howl of the wind and swirling snow scattered in from the porch and onto the stone floor in the narthex. Francois stood in the portal for a protracted moment, trying to get his eyes adjusted to the gloom. But even then he could only see the smidge of light the stained glass filtered in. He felt Caitlin and Adolphe standing behind him. Had they not been there, he would not have entered the black depths in a million years. He would have stood in that doorway until he died. He stepped into the church proper, and they followed. If he was walking them to their death, the choice was their own. Caitlin closed the door, entombing them in darkness. She choked down the fear that rose up as she recalled the little boy murdering Father Davies in the church in Tolmas. It seemed as though that all happened in some fevered nightmare, a year past. The bright grey of the snow gone, it took a moment for their eyes to see anything but blackness. Caitlin heard Francois reach past her and slide the bolt home, locking the door behind them. He pulled off his pack and rummaged in it, then came back out with the sapper flashlight he had taken from the barge in the Riekvald tunnel. She felt his hand find hers. Then he guided her fingers to his shoulder. Caitlin saw the shape of Adolf's pale face in the dark behind her. She held the shotgun out to him. "Here," she whispered, letting him take the butt end so he could follow closely. Adolf's hands found the smooth walnut of the stock, and he grasped it. His fingers felt the trigger guard, and a tingle of excited adrenaline sparked in his crotch. A weapon. He now had his hands on a weapon that would certainly do the trick to dispatch Caitlin and Francois. Wrest it from the Irish bitch when the right moment came, and he could earn everything the demon said was waiting for him on the other side of their murder. Francois's flashlight burst to life. The beam led them, slow and steady, into the nave and up the centre aisle. Francois searched the darkness for any sign of movement. If Matthias Nilsson's corpse was still here, the advantage was entirely his. The light played over each line of oak pews, seeking any potential lair in the shadows. Francois's only hope was that his response to an attack was faster than the attack itself. He knew that was a 50-50 proposition at best. They reached the bay, and Francois paused, looking to the side chapel that extended out to his right, watching the dark stained glass for any silhouette that might reveal Adam lurking. For a millisecond he saw him, kneeling there, watching them, and Francois's heart stopped. He swung the beam toward it, revealing Sainte Marguerite, frozen in stained glass veneration, supplicant in prayer, silhouetted against the dark grey of the storm outside. If Sainte Marguerite was risen, rampaging for her God, she was not here in the little cathedral in Vermand that bore her name. Francois moved deeper into the church, leading them through the transept and into the alcove, to hidden stairs that circled up and away into the bell tower. As he stepped into the tower's base, his foot hit steel and sent a shrapnel helmet spinning away into pitch black. It clattered to a stop, and the three of them stood there, silent, breath caught, waiting for demons to descend upon them. But no bloody implements stabbed them in the kidneys. No sound of coming death echoed down from the steeple above. Nothing appeared out of thin air to devour their souls. Francois let himself breathe, trying to gather his wits. He closed the door, then he continued, feeling his way to the dark stairs, finding each kickboard with his toes, then stepping up gingerly, flashlight shining upward as they climbed. Eyes focused on the darkness above, seeking Matthias's waiting corpse, cutlass held ready to strike. When they stepped onto the landing at the top of the stairs, Francois's instincts were humming with terror. He searched the corners. There was no trace that Adam had been there that very morning, lying dead inside Matthias Nilsson. A dull grey rectangle shone down from above the ladder that led to the bell tower's eyrie. Cold wind blew down with it. Francois took a breath in and exhaled slowly, and he grasped hold of the ladder and ascended. The flashlight's zenith stabbed up into the trapdoor portal above, followed by the silver of the cutlass blade. Caitlin and Adolf climbed out of the pitch black after him. As Francois came into the tower, the white powder of swirling snow gusted past him. It had left a fine coat of icy crystals on the bell tower floor, but the angle of the sharp, peaked roof above had kept most of the snow from finding a foothold. Francois scanned the corners behind him. Nothing there. The night beyond was a whirling dervish of snow, whipped by the wind, falling from the dark clouds at a steady pace. Francois came all the way up onto the deck and moved around the tarnished brass bell that hung in the centre. Francois froze. He was not certain he would have seen him first had he not heard his name spoken. Matthias's body sat on the floor in the corner of the tower, leaning back against the snow-capped balustrade. Snow rested in the folds of his uniform, coated his shoulders, dusted across the top of his hair, turning it white, giving the impression that he had dear Adam's fair hair instead of Matthias Nilsson's black locks. "I knew if I waited, you would return," Adam said. Francois relaxed his shoulders and readied his sword arm to strike. Isaiah Taylor stopped and tried to get his bearings. The snowfall was almost as blinding as the night. He prayed he had not somehow turned himself around and started back in the direction of the Siegfried Line's barbed wire nightmare. Fat flakes kept sifting down, like flour, onto Aunt Jean's breadboard, preparing the way for loaves of her finest wheat bread. He almost heard Aunt Jean humming in the background as she folded dough. As a child, as they sat at the old dinner table while Jean baked, working on the readers his aunt scrounged from the families she cleaned and cooked for, Isaiah was top-notch at math. As soon as he knew what the shapes on the page meant, the numbers fell into place easily. The sense of where they should end up in the final sum column was clear as day to his sharp mind. He simply filled in the blanks. But what he took true delight in was the joy of disappearing into a good book. His mama claimed he read straight off the page at 3, and even if it had been 4, it remained a point of immense pride. Isaiah embraced his gift, diving headfirst into the world's fiction created. He felt as though he gained a full second lifetime while lost inside the pages of some great work. It amazed him that multitudes of long-dead men and women could talk inside his head through squiggles, lines, and dots on a page. The new tome before him was thick, bound in dark, worn leather with fading gold flake on the cover and spine. "Aunt Jean?" Jane looked up from her work. "Yes?" "Where is Camelot?" "You mean Camelot, I suppose?" "Where do you imagine it to be?" Jean asked. "Don't know. They don't say in the book. Not far as I can tell," Isaiah replied. "Then that writer is leaving it up to you." "To me? That's crazy, Auntie. I didn't write no books." "You didn't write any books," she corrected. "I suppose." "Well, Zay, if the writer didn't specify, and you don't know the answer, then it's up to your mind to fill in the blanks." He pondered that. "They say it's on a big island." "Do they?" Isaiah nodded. "And Grandmama was from an island?" "Indeed." "Haiti?" Isaiah queried. "Yes." "But then maybe Camelot is on Haiti a long, long time ago." "Fair enough," replied Aunt Jean. That solved, Isaiah dove back into the hole the open pages laid before him. In his mind, these black-skinned Haitian men in shining silver armor, fighting giants, wicked sorcery, and dragons, battling in tournaments for the love of beautiful black-skinned women, came to life in a Camelot on the Caribbean isle of Haiti. They became kin to him, and he was the heir apparent to all their lessons of virtue, grace, courage, martial power, and chivalry. As they stopped again, he sensed something in the darkness. He searched the woods for pursuers. Nothing there but trees disappearing in the snow, vanishing into the night. What he would not give for a war horse, some silver armor, and Excalibur right about now. You suppose he would have to settle for his legs and his dog. The nicked-up, dulled cavalry sword in his hand that the Red Maiden nearly cut down Caitlin with 24 hours prior would have to be his Excalibur. Isaiah sighed ruefully at the image. Saddest fucking night I ever seen. Black Betty had been circling out again, running in long circuits around him and eventually reappearing at his side. He was unsure if it was purposeful on her part or just part of her game, but he knew it would confuse the hell out of anyone hunting them. She had been gone for some time. He began to wonder if this time she might not return. Then he heard her bark, sounding out ahead of him. He picked up his pace and moved toward it. When he crested a small ridge overlooking an open field, he dropped and ducked back into cover. Black Betty was 100 yards of him, backing away from a trio of men. She barked and growled, charging toward them, then wheeling at the last second and running away. The lead man took a swing at her with a bayonet, but she stayed just out of reach, taunting and threatening with her teeth and growl. Then the three men charged, sprinting toward her. Black Betty spun and tore into the woods, leading them away from Isaiah. Oh, Black Betty, Bam-ba-lam, Isaiah said quietly. Isaiah waited for a long minute. Her bark grew further and further distant, muffled by the snow and wind until he no longer heard her at all. He scanned the woods for any other hunters. Nothing. But where there were three, there were more. Like finding a cockroach in the cupboard, he knew there had to be 100 that kept themselves invisible. The second the candle was out, they would swarm out of their warren, searching for repast. He did not aim to satisfy their need. Isaiah stood and jogged down from the rise, bent low, looking both directions. He reached Betty's path and cut directly across it, heading the opposite way she had led her pursuers. There was rhyme and reason to her game. He hoped he was comprehending its meaning. The woods began to thicken as he churned up a long, gentle rise. He slowed, panting, and stopped to catch his breath under a large oak. As his heart calmed and his breath came under control, he brushed snow from the oak's trunk, revealing patchy moss beneath it. North. Black Betty had led the pursuers north. He lined up his cheek to the tree, taking a bearing directly south on another stand of trees 100 yards away. While Black Betty ran those fools north in circles, he would head directly and unerringly south, hoping to find any survivors from his party. That was his plan, anyway. Plans these days seemed to go directly the opposite of intention. But Isaiah was glad to have one, regardless. He would deal with everything else as it came. Isaiah stood and continued south, filling his hopes and prayers with action.